Hey, I'm Finn. Today I just wanted to do a video on going through a couple of the characteristics. There's 13 characteristics that you can develop having grown up in an alcoholic home and or a dysfunctional home. And the list was actually, the 13 characteristics were compiled by a guy called Tony A. I don't know his last name, but called the laundry list. So if you haven't already read it, highly recommend it because you'll probably find on there, much like myself, that you're able to tick off a lot of those characteristics. If you have, you'll probably resonate with then a few. I'll give a few experiences or examples of from myself, elaborating on what those characteristics are. I won't go into all of them, but maybe 4 of them or something. I might do another video on them if anybody's interested. But so the first one I want to touch on is a characteristic which is that you can develop is that you're frightened of angry people. So looking back, yes, I would say I didn't like angry people. Like, that scared me. As I've gotten older, I don't think I'm as fearful as angry people, but what I actually would put alongside of that is the avoidance of conflict. Okay, so growing up, and who doesn't? I mean, seriously, who likes conflict? And if you do, I think you've got problems. So, in the sense that you've really got to look at that because it's highly dysfunctional. Um, as a child, there was a lot of fighting, right? And I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this. And it's, your anxiety is really up. It's not a nice environment to be around. It's, you're very hyper vigilant. There's a lot of anticipation about what's going to occur. And so clearly, if you take it outside the home and you're dealing with, just people, the public, and you come across situations where there is conflict, more often than not, your same feelings that you dealt with inside the home, you're going to have out in the outside world. So I've never liked dealing with conflict. And I think growing up, I learnt skills to almost be a bit manipulative. So I'll elaborate on that in the sense that I became a peacemaker mediator. So when I sort of saw that something was heating up and this sort of a situation could go a bit out of control, I almost felt this need to step in and just sort of be this calming influence and bring everyone back down to normal, right? And obviously inside me at the same time, I'm feeling incredibly stressed. Like, I'm feeling anxious. I'm not calm in myself. I'm not feeling like, oh, hey, I'm the guru of calm. Like, guys, just chill. Like, it wasn't like that. As a child, you sort of, you're very anxious yourself, but you just want the environment to go back to normal, right? And so you learn these skills to sort of be this manipulative force in a way that is sort of always trying to control your environment to bring it back to a peaceful place. You don't want to deal with the conflict. You don't want it around. You don't want the angry person. And so fearful of angry people sits really in line to me of avoidance of conflict because, one, it's toxic anyway. I don't think you should be dealing with angry people, and I don't think you should be dealing with excessive conflict. However, it's sort of knowing where that line blurs, or ends, because obviously, as we're going to have living in life, there's going to be situations where we have no control over that. We walk in the public street, like, we're going to deal with people who, for whatever reason, they just don't like you. Like the coffee guy who just, I don't know, for whatever reason, just has got a chip on his shoulder about you, or the guy or the woman you cut off accidentally at the roundabout and has road rage. Like, there's just going to be people in your life where you just can't control whether they're going to be angry or not. And it's obviously on us and how we choose to deal with that. And that can bring back a lot of feeling because we can't control other people's feelings, but that desire to try to avoid angry situations to the point where we may become submissive. And I've experienced that a lot. And it's something I'm definitely working on myself, which is the word assertiveness, and owning that, because it feels very unnatural. I mean, when your self-worth isn't great, and often it's not going to be, having grown up in these home environments where you weren't the sole focus as a child, it was another adult was, you're not going to feel like entitled or, I guess, right in actually defending yourself or your beliefs or standing up for yourself. And that actually in itself is another characteristic of adult children of alcoholics, where you don't feel like you have the right to defend yourself, or you don't feel comfortable standing for what you believe in. So that's a hurdle in itself. But I think a lot of that, if you work on that one first, you're then able to deal more with angry people, because you're more comfortable in being able to assert yourself. It's an interesting one because it's not something that, like I've said before, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens because we go through lots of experiences where we learn to respect ourselves and have self-worth. And in a previous video, I just mentioned where that comes from, and it comes from really knowing what you want from life. When you become very clear about that, you tend to become very intolerant, which I do not think is a bad thing, of situations that do not sit in line with where you're headed and where you want to go, and that affect your space, your boundaries. You want to get to a point where you don't want to deal with it, and I think that's great. One of the other characteristics is being addicted to excitement, and I can actually really relate to this, particularly going back to my teen years. Although I wouldn't say so much excitement. I'm not a very, personally for me, some people are going to really resonate with that. Like, they really get off on exciting situations, highly excitable, and that is the trait. For me, I'm not a very excitable person. As you can probably tell with my energy, I'm very like, I'm fairly pragmatic. I love to deal with reality. This is the sort of person I am. However, in saying that, I've always felt more alive when there's been a situation in my life where there's some drama. Okay, so I'm going to use the word drama versus excited, but that whenever there's been something that occurred where it's a little bit left field or is dramatic, it's almost like I've had this feeling that I've woken up, and it's like, ooh, like I feel somewhat alive again, and probably hypervigilant. You're back to that sort of ding-ding state that you lived in growing up, because clearly when you were living with drama, you were used to drama, you're familiar with it, right? And there's a mistake there that often adult children of alcoholics or adult children of dysfunction go on to repeat a life where they continue to have drama in their life because it's what's familiar to you. It's all you know. And in fact, the opposite feels boring. But what I want you to get is that is not a truth, and it's a process. It's a big one, but getting that in favoring peace and serenity is 100 times better than having drama in your life. But you've got to come to that point where you want that, and that's a journey in itself. But I absolutely relate with that characteristic about addicted to excitement, and as I term it, addicted to having drama in your life. It was pretty heightened for me in my late teens, early 20s. It's sort of like you get off on things happening and having problems in a way. And we all go through that. But there's to overcome that, there's a point where you need to desire the opposite more than you want drama. So I definitely understand that one. Another one's characteristic is becoming isolated. So you'll often find adult children of alcoholics or who have grown up in dysfunctional homes, there's a sort of personality trait where they're not all going to be introverts, and that's different. Being an introvert is different from being isolated, actually. You can be an extrovert who isolates themselves. So it's sort of like you don't mind being isolated, and often you pull back into yourself and your world because it was the way you coped growing up in the family environment. You probably had a very rich inner experience in your head. You lived in your head. It was your safe world. Actually, it is the safest world, in a lot of ways. You feel like no one really can get in here. This is where you go. This is where you retreat to. And so that's probably what I mean by isolated, not so much on physical terms. Like, you can physically isolate yourself. You may become someone who's a recluse, right? And I can totally understand the feeling for that. It's almost trying to just escape the whole world because you just don't feel you've got the capacity to deal with it, and you almost don't want to, right? And they're things that you know, again, it's a self-development thing, because you're not going to be happy living that way in the long run. And I've been there. I know what that's like. So the other way of isolating yourself is you actually isolate yourself emotionally and mentally. So you're sort of not present. So you're not there for people. You're emotionally not present for people because you've isolated yourself. And it's a hard one because, you know, it's a survival mechanism. It's a coping mechanism, and it's going to take time to sort of, you probably will go through experiences, and I do all the time, like where you are in with the world and then you're back in your own isolated world. And you know, you don't have to be one all the time. Like maybe that's the better place to live in, where it's back and forwards versus just constantly isolated, because I don't think you can survive in the world as a, you know, absolutely isolated. I mean, it just, no man's an island. Like you know, your purpose in the world's going to involve other people. Your purpose is going to be what you can give the world and others. So you have to get to a point where you can be with the world, but maybe on your terms, and that's okay. Fourth one is, just trying to think. Yeah, okay, I really get this one. So judging yourself harshly. So wow, like I'm looking back more on my life and realizing how much perfectionist I am. Like, in fact, I've had two experiences, and it just went so over my head. Growing up in high school, I remember a teacher said to me, I handed in this work on this piece of paper, and I wouldn't say my writing was, you know, anal, or like, you know, yeah, it was, you know, it was eligible. Like, he could read it, but maybe he thought it was really neat. I don't know. And he said to me, you know, if in perfectionism can be a disability. And I mean, I was 16. Like, I knew both words. I knew what perfectionism was and disability was. But it just went right over my head. I was like, what? And I went home and I said to her, you know, what does it mean? Someone says you perfectionism can be a disability. And my mum was like, it means that, you know, trying to be too perfect can be disabling. Like you can't move forward. You won't be able to really ever move forward with that. And I just thought, oh yeah, what? And then I was doing a lot of self-development work. I got into coaching, and I remember someone who was my head coach sort of out of nowhere just said, do you know what perfect is? And this just came from nowhere. I was like, what? I was like, no. I was thinking, yeah, but tell me. I really want to know. And she goes, what is, and what isn't. And again, I was just like, huh? And looking back now, like that was probably 6 years ago, I just so get that I must have been sending off such energy of perfectionism. Like, and you know, this is this judging yourself harshly. Like, I really expect a lot from myself. I expect a lot from others too, less so of the general public, probably more of my family. I have high expectations, but in terms of judging yourself harshly, that is a massive characteristic of growing up in an alcoholic home or a dysfunctional home. And it's one that I don't think it's all so bad, because you may have high expectations of life, but it's knowing when to let go. And that's one of the biggest things. Like, you know, it is a hard one, because I'm still a perfectionist in a lot of ways. And it's learning to know when it's not important and that the bigger goal is more important. So if something's holding you back and you're judging yourself so harshly, but it's stopping you moving, it's just not conducive to anything. And in fact, you know, better to do something than to do nothing. And so therefore better to do something than do something perfectly that you're never going to do. I mean, here's the thing, you're never going to feel like doing something. This is really weird, but like, it's like we always say, oh, when I feel like it, I'll do it. The thing is, here's the thing, you're never going to feel like it. There's never going to be the right time to do something. No one ever feels like exercising unless you already do it, right? But let's say you haven't. You're never going to come to a point where you feel like exercising. This is the same with anything in your life. You just got to do it. And it's such a huge thing for me, like, because I've always gone by my feelings, like, oh, when I feel like I can deal with that, I'll do it. And when I feel like this, that's never going to happen. And this is a slow journey I've been dealing with, but every time that I've stepped in and just thought, nah, I'm just going to do it anyway because the day is not going to come when I feel like I need to do this. It leaps and bounds, I've moved forward. So judging yourself harshly is okay to a point. To have high expectations of yourself and you've got clear goals about, who you are and where you want to go. But when it gets to a point where you judge yourself so harshly that you're not moving, and it's disabling, then there's a real problem there. And that's the one where you've got to look at the reality of perfectionism and that it just often is not conducive to moving forward in life and going where you need to go. So there are 4 things. Clearly, like I said, there's 13, and I might touch on them in another video. But it is really liberating to start to look at them, look then at yourself and see where these characteristics continue to come up or whether they come up at all, whether they're sort of ones you may have overcome. Like, it doesn't mean you're always going to have them. There's some things we actually learn to just, I don't know, like we may do self-work and grow out of some of those characteristics. So I'd be really interested to know if anyone's experienced similar ones to the ones I mentioned today. So yeah, being frightened of angry people / avoiding conflict, judging yourself harshly, or, you're a perfectionist. What was the other ones? Becoming isolated, whether you feel like someone who really isolates yourself from the world, either physically or emotionally, and whether you're addicted to excitement. That'd be interesting to me to find out. So I'll just finish up there today. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon. Bye.